Hi, this is Mike making my video. Today is the 4th of September 2025 and it's 5:52 a.m. Basically making this video to talk about basically enlightenment. And basically enlightenment is the same as nirvana. And so you can use them interchangeably. Enlightenment, nirvana, and really ultimately what it is a release from suffering. It's a respite, and I've had many of them in my life. Many instances where I've had nirvana or a release of suffering, and basically along with that, comes a period of time where you have epiphanies. These epiphanies, basically take place, and you have it to where epiphanies take place, and you have it to where you have where the windows of heaven open up and my eyes become open and I see things. And ultimately what I see is things, like spirits. I see spirits, and I experience that, and I experience it to where I see other miracles that take place, and my mind becomes active, fully active. Where I'm using 100% of my mind, and when the left and right hand side of the mind make peace with each other, you can move mountains. And so what happens is I go through a period of time where these things take place, where I see things, and these things that I see are ultimately supernatural in origin. And so those types of things take place, but then there's three key points of instances where I have to know nothing, and I have to not lean on my own understanding, because if I already know everything, then there's no room to be taught anything. So I have to clear my mind and know nothing, and I have to sacrifice and give up everything. So I have nothing. I have no possessions, and that's when I leave everything behind. And basically there's that, and then there's to where I have nothing, I know nothing, and I desire nothing. So I don't desire anything, not even so much as spiritual enlightenment. I have things I desire that are center point in my desires, but I put that on the back burner, and then I just basically decide to submit. And when I submit, submission, what happens is, I submit to the universe, and then the universe, ultimately reciprocates and submits to me. So, basically that's what happens. And I had the things like right now. I kind of overspent and I bought two extra watches that I didn't need. So I spent $100 on those. But pretty much everything else I desired to have. I desired to have a better computer, a decent computer, and I got one. And I got things, but I basically left everything behind and then lost everything. But then I regained the money that took place in place of basically in place of the things that I lost. So I more or less got $10,000, and then of course out of that 10,000, I more or less got about $4,000 more, and then I got about or $5,000 more, and then I got about 10,000. So I got about 15,000, and I more or less had about $10,000 in property that I lost, and then I got about $5,000 extra, $4 or $5,000 extra. So and then I pretty much got it to the point where I just get the things that I want to have, and I try to not be too extravagant on my spending, and I have a place to live. I have hot and cold running water. I have food to eat. I have a bed to sleep in, and I have the medications that I need for my diabetes and bipolar disorder. So, I don't know if it's going to be possible, sustainable for me to try to pursue enlightenment again, awakening, because, I think I'm at a point in time to where I can still manifest things, but, I don't think I have it to where it's conducive, for me to pursue supernatural things anymore. I think I pretty much exhausted all the possibilities as far as that goes, and I might get a car or a truck, but other than that, though, I don't think I'm gonna really pursue supernatural things anymore. It's not so much that I don't desire it. Sometimes it gets to the point where, I get inundated with property and things, and sometimes I get to a point where I'm at a standstill where my knowledge is such that, I need to erase everything, or the majority of things, and I need to basically get a new take on things, a new way of looking at things. And they say that happiness, basically is contentment, and there's euphoria and bliss and expansiveness, but those types of things are getting to be null and void. And being content really means being happy with what you have. Maybe if I have a little more, but being happy with what you have and appreciating what you have and being thankful for what you have. So, ultimately that's how it works. I believe that there's infinite possibilities and things, but the person pretty much knows what their limitations are. What things they can pursue and what types of things they can have, and It's once you've gotten to that point in life, where you've reached everything that you could possibly want, and it gets to the point where enlightenment gets to be farther and farther away, where you can't really obtain it. So, if I have money and possessions, those things basically take the place of enlightenment. Where if I have a lack, my DOS operating system, my BIOS, basically what that is the body feedback and stuff like that. That when that shuts down and your brain doesn't get any signals that your body is responding, basically what happens is it sends, signals or DMT, a rush of it, and it's a survival mechanism. And this DMT, more or less opens your mind up to receiving things that you normally wouldn't receive, and very very few people in the population obtain that kind of knowledge, and very few people experience those types of things. And so they say 2% of the population actually achieve enlightenment. And I've done this many a times, and usually, as a rule of thumb, I more or less get it to where I receive things and I receive knowledge, supernatural knowledge, and I receive enlightenment. But it's short-lived. It's not necessarily something that stays active in your mind for a long period of time. It might get to the point where you might go on like a resounding drum or a clanging cymbal for a period of time, but after a period of time, that dissipates, and you end up going back to a default state. And this default state, basically, sometimes you you might be a little worse off than you were before. You might be a little bit more depressed, but I feel listless and lethargic sometimes, and it's because I've gotten to the point of rest, and I no longer desire the same things I used to desire. I no longer have the drive to do the same things I used to do, and my goals in life, aren't what they used to be. I no longer desire to be with women. I mean, yeah, of course I'd like to, but my body really isn't responding in the way it should. And I just got to the point where there's just no desire or drive. And I lose that drive and ability, and the wind gets taken out of my sails, and I just default to a state to where I feel pretty plain and listless. So we're really ultimately that's all there is in a nutshell. And I just get to the point where I have acceptance. And once you accept things for what they are, and you appreciate things for what they are, you no longer have the things nagging at you night and day about the things that you want to achieve, and you don't have it to where you have a lot of unanswered questions. And my questions have been answered. So anyway, that's all I got to say. Over and out.